Futurist speech to the English, given at the Lyceum Club of London, F.T. Marinetti, December 1910. And there, with a few picturesque abridgments, you have some of our more interesting ideas and actions. I don't know whether this lively account has been able to give you a sense of what futurism really is. In any case, you have already grasped one part of our philosophical, political, and artistic conception, its method of adopting the cruelest form of sincerity and the boldest kind of violence. I couldn't imagine a better way of giving you an exact idea of what we are than to tell you what we think of you. I will express myself with complete candor, carefully refraining from paying you court in the style of cosmopolitan lecturers who crush their audience with praise before cramming them full of banalities. One of our young humorists has said that every good futurist should be discourteous 20 times a day. So I will be discourteous with you, pluckily confessing to you all the ill that we think of the English, after having spoken much good of them. For as you well know, we love the indomitable and bellicose patriotism that sets you apart. We love the national pride that prompts your great muscularly courageous race. We love the generous and intelligent individualism that enables you to open your arms to individualists of every land, whether libertarians or anarchists. But your broad love of liberty is not all that we admire. What most sets you apart is that, amid so much pacifist nonsense and evangelical cowardice, you cherish an unbridled passion for struggle in all its forms. From boxing, simple, brutal, and rapid, to the monstrous roaring necks of the cannon on the decks of your dreadnoughts, crouched in their swiveling caves of steel, turning to scent the appetizing enemy squadrons in the distance. You know perfectly well that there is nothing worse for a man's blood than forgiving offenses. You know that prolonged peace, which has been fatal to the Latin races, is no less poisonous for the Anglo-Saxon races. But I promised you discourtesies, and here they are. To a certain degree you are the victims of your traditionalism and its medieval trappings, in which there persists a whiff of archives and a rattling of chains that hinder your precise and carefree forward march. You will admit the oddness of this in a people of explorers and colonizers whose enormous ocean liners have obviously shrunken the world. Most of all, I reproach you for maddening cult of aristocracy. No one admits to being a bourgeois in England. Everyone despises his neighbor and calls him a bourgeois. You have an obsessive mania for always being chic. For the love of being chic, you renounce passionate action, violence of heart, exclamations, shouts, and even tears. The English want to be cold at any cost, everywhere, by the bedside of an adored person, in the face of death, or at the prospect of happiness. For the love of chic, you never discuss what you are doing, for one must always be light and airy in conversation. When the women leave after dinner, you chat a bit about politics, but not too much. It wouldn't be chic. Your writers have to be men of the world, for you can hardly imagine a novel whose action is not set in high society. Try as you might to be modern, you still preserve an essentially medieval distinction between master and servant, grounded in absurd adoration of wealth. It's one of your proverbs that a rich man never hangs in England. To that kind of thinking you add a no less absurd contempt for the poor. His intellectual efforts, even his genius, strike you as useless. And yet you have a great love for intelligence and culture, and no other people devours books the way you do. Still, it remains only a way of passing one's leisure hours. You lack consuming intellectual passions, a sharp and adventurous taste for ideas, an impulse toward the unknown of the imagination, a passion for the future, a thirst for revolution. You are horribly custom-bound. Isn't it true that you firmly believe that the Puritans saved England, and that chastity is a nation's most important virtue? Do you remember the dismal, ridiculous condemnation of Oscar Wilde, which Europe has never forgiven you for? Didn't all your newspapers cry out then that it was time to throw open every window because the plague was over? Naturally, in such an atmosphere of habitual and hypocritical formality, your young women are skilled in the use of their naive elegance to carry on the most audaciously lascivious games. to prepare themselves well for marriage, the intangible domain of the conjugal police. As for your 20-year-old young men, almost all of them are homosexuals for a time, which after all is absolutely respectable. The taste of theirs evolves through a kind of intensification of the camaraderie and friendship found in athletic sports in the years before they turn 30, the time for work and good order, when they show their heels to Sodom in order to marry a young woman whose gown is shamelessly décolleté. Then they hasten to condemn the born and invert severely, the counterfeit man, the half-woman who fails to conform. Isn't it excessively formalistic of you to declare, as you do, that in order to know someone, you must break bread with him? That is, have studied the way he eats. But how could you judge us, the Italians, from our way of eating when we always eat sloppily, our epigastric regions strangled by love or ambition? To that one must add your obsessive desire to keep up appearances in all things, and a fussy mania for etiquette, masks, and folding screens of every sort, invented by prudishness and a conventional morality. Yet I won't insist, but hasten on to speak about your greatest defect, a defect that you yourselves have bequeathed to Europe, and one that, in my opinion, is an obstacle to your marvelous practical instinct and your science of the rapid life. I allude to your snobbery, whether it consists of a mad exclusive cult of racial purity seen in your aristocracy, or whether it creates a kind of religion out of fashion and transforms your illustrious tailors into so many high priests of lost religions. I'm also referring to your dogmatic and imperious norms for good living and the sacred tables of comme il faut, in the light of which you neglect and abolish, with an astonishing light-heartedness, the fundamental worth of the individual, just as soon as he falls short of the supreme law of snobbery. All of this renders your existence singularly artificial. It makes you the most contradictory people on the planet. Hence all your intellectual maturity cannot save you from sometimes seeming a people in the process of formation. You invented the love of hygiene, the adoration of muscles, a harsh taste for effort, all of which triumph in your beautiful sporting life. But unfortunately, you push your exaggerated cult of the body to the point of scorning ideas, and you care seriously only for physical pleasures. Platonic love is virtually absent among you, which is a good thing, but your love of succulent meals is excessive, and it's in the brutalizing religion of the table that you appease all your anxieties and all your worries. From your sensuality you extract a formidable serenity in the face of mortal suffering. Very well, then you should stop giving so much importance to physical suffering. You think yourselves very religious. It's pure illusion. You pay no attention to your inner lives, and your race lacks true mystical feeling. I congratulate you on this, but unfortunately you prefer to take refuge in Protestantism, a bon état faire for your intelligence, which saves you the trouble of thinking freely, without fear and without hope, like a black banner among the shadows. It's through intellectual laziness that you fall so often to your knees, and for the love of good conventional and puerile formalities. No one loves the fleshly pleasures more than you, and yet you are the Europeans who pride themselves on their chastity. You love and generously welcome every revolutionary, but that doesn't hinder you from solemnly defending the principles of order. You adore the fine, swift machines that skim the earth, sea, and clouds, yet you carefully preserve every last debris from the past. Is this, after all, a defect? You shouldn't treat all remarks as reproofs. To contradict oneself is to live, and you know how to contradict yourselves bravely. But besides, I know that you nurse a deep hatred for German clumsiness, and this is enough to absolve you completely. Editor's note. Text from here on is present only from the 1915 edition onward. I have told you in a synoptic way what we think of England and the English, but I now hear the courteous reply that I already suspect is on your lips. You surely want to stop my discourtesies by telling me how highly you think of Italy and the Italians. Well, no, I don't want to listen. The compliment you are about to pay could only sadden me, because what you love in our dear peninsula is exactly the object of our hatreds. Indeed, you crisscross Italy only to meticulously sniff out the traces of our oppressive past, and you are happy, insanely happy, if you have the good fortune to carry home some miserable stone that has been trodden by our ancestors. When? When will you disembarrass yourselves of the lymphatic ideology of that deplorable Ruskin, which I would like to cover with so much ridicule that you would never forget it? With his morbid dream of primitive and rustic life, with his nostalgia for Homeric cheeses and legendary wool spinners, with his hatred for the machine, steam power, and electricity, that maniac and antique simplicity is like a man who, after having reached full physical maturity, still wants to sleep in his cradle and feed himself to the breast of his decrepit old nurse in order to recover his thoughtless infancy. Ruskin would certainly have applauded those passeist Venetians who wanted to rebuild the absurd bell tower of San Marco, as if a baby girl who had lost her grandmother were to be offered a little cloth and cardboard doll as a substitute.